Welcome to School Readiness Conversation, a program where we discuss early childhood development and how the various components affect the child's well-being. We discuss how policy guides practice, how it affects the parent within the home, the teacher within the school, and how the whole environment in terms of policy and practice affects the child's growth into a wholesome adult that gives meaning back to society when they become a citizen. My name is Tendai Nyamajiwa, and today I'm joined by Naison Bunu, the National Coordinator of the Zimbabwe Network of Early Childhood Development Actors, as well as Mr. Kaunda Chidota from the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Tendai.
So as a startup to this conversation, what is early childhood development? Mr. Bunu.
Thank you very much. Early childhood is defined as the period between pregnancy up to 8 years. This is in terms of definition. However, it includes the child and also all those that take care of the child. However, in addition, it also defines the conceptual aspects of development, which are the learning, which are the health aspects, which are the nutrition aspects, which are the social, emotional aspects to the child. And these all together have got to be nurtured in order for the child to gainfully grow to be a good adult. It is also known through research that the child's development is 80% at 3 years, which is the first 1,000 days. And that by the year 5, they are 90% developed in terms of the brain. And that it is very important for this period to be taken care of by society, including also the parents, the caregivers, and the community.
So, Mr. Bunu, I understand you're saying that early childhood development begins way before the child joins school. As we know, mostly we discuss early childhood development, ECD, as the first time the child goes to school. And the period prior to that, we rarely discuss it as early childhood development. I find that definition interesting. Mr. Kaunda Chidota, would you like to add anything?
Early childhood includes, out of what Mr. Bunu has said, all the experiences that a child is exposed to from conception to 8 years. These experiences come through various ways. One, while the children are still at home, they are educated. Two, they transit into the school system where they will meet the teacher and the environment in which they are living. The end product of all these experiences develop the child's cognitive, social, emotional domains. And they are indicators to see that this child has gone through all those aspects of development.
Gentlemen, I hear from the discussion you alluded to ECD affecting the social skills development, the cognitive development of the child and various aspects. So what then do we define ECD as? Is it a natural occurrence or it has to do with services and programs? Mr. Bunu, are you able to answer that one?
There are two aspects to it. There are some which are determined by nature, which just happen. That if a child is conceived within the womb of the mother, that child is living within that environment. However, there are some aspects that they've got to grow well, which have got to be done by the parents and the mother. And that has got to be determined in terms of that the mother and the father have got a good conducive living environment. So in this case, I think there are about some sections that we have got to focus on. It is the pregnancy period, which needs actually to be defined, followed by the birth to about 3 years or the first 1,000 days, which are also have got a certain factor where the child will grow naturally, but would need some interventions which needed to be put across, where the environment, the play area, the home, the food that is given, the social aspects which need to be done, the development of the language of that child which need to be assisted, and knowing how, when and how the child needs what in terms of development. But I know also, I think, which Mr. Shidota can explain further, that when they are ready to go to school, the 4 to 5 years, which we are calling in Zimbabwe, ECD A and B, and also the last section, which is the grade 1 and 2. All those have got interventions which need to be taken care of.
So, Mr. Bono, I noticed that you discussed how there is an interlinked relationship from when the child is conceived within the mother's womb and the services that the mother gets during that time, and how the environment within the home shapes the child's readiness for school. Mr. Chidota, can you give us an overview of the programs that the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education has in terms of how the child transitions into the school environment?
As for the ministry receives the children from home where they are having the parents. So that transition from the home environment into the school environment has to be done smoothly, so that the child does not face any difficulties that is a potential to affect their learning. So as the children enter into the school system is ready, puts in place a lot of things to receive the child. When they get into ECD A, they continue to ECD B. Then there is another transition that happens from ECD B into grade 1. It has to be also formalized. The children are now familiar of the school environment. They get into grade 1 through that process, grade 2 through that process. And finally, the last transition from grade 2, from the infant school module into the grade 3.
One would notice that at times we might have children that will get to grade 1 before doing ECD A and B. So from that which we are discussing, we note that there is a chance that a child might lose out on developmental milestones that could be reaped from going to ECD A and B.
ECD A is compulsory. ECD A and B are compulsory. That being the case, then there is no chance that the children will proceed to the next level. Primary education is currently 9 years, so we don't expect any child to be enrolled into ECD-B without going through ECD-A. That is the policy standing.
Can I come in?
Yes, Mr. Bon.
I think that, one, we are focused on the child. But however, for the child to meet all those developmental milestones, which I think he has actually indicated, those of learning, those of health, those of nutrition, and those of the psychosocial development. I think we need both to focus on the child, but also on the support services and the stakeholders who need that to happen. Because some, yes, their development process, which is determined hereditary, is already there. But for them to meet, there are certain interventions which needed to come in. And I think in Zimbabwe, although and also within the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, they are focused on the 4 or 3.5 to 8 years. But I think the learning starts right from conception up to 3 years, and where learning has got to be focused on. And in that, I think we need a very conscious and well-arranged program, both for the parents especially, and also for the community in order to support that. And I think in this, we know the Ministry of Health is dealing specifically with medical specific issues. But I think the parenting program, I think, is not very well supported there in order to enrich the development of the child. That is very, very important. When we are speaking of early childhood development, we should not leave out the support services, both in terms of those categories.
Thank you, Mr. Bono. Mr. Chidota, I know you're itching to come in and discuss some of the points Mr. Bono was discussing earlier on. We'll come back to you as we go into this next segment. In this first segment, we were talking about early childhood development and how it is defined in our context, the programs and the services that guide this section of the child's growth. So we discussed early childhood development from conception to 8 years and the services and programs that we talk about when we're discussing this important level of growth of the child. We take a break. Welcome to School Readiness Conversation as we unpack school readiness and its tenets. Today I'm joined by Naison Bono and Kaunda Chidota. And in the previous segment, we were discussing early childhood development, its definition. And right now, I would like for us to unpack where we are in Zimbabwe in terms of early childhood development, its services and programs. Can we have both formal and informal early childhood development programs?
The process now, as Mr. Bunu has alluded, starting from conception, we are saying there are a number of stakeholders who are in the programs that we are referring to. We made mention of the home environment where the parent resides. Then we also talked of other stakeholders, for example, Ministry of Health and Child Care. As a ministry, we have a school health policy, which the ministry works with the Ministry of Health and Child Care to give health to the children as they grow, because Mr. Bunu was looking at issues like hygiene, nutrition, and the like. The ministry also is working with the Ministry of Health in that line through the school health policy. Then you also talked of the transition from home into the school. That is very key, because as a system, it is very difficult because we don't have parenting programs. The parents are raising the children differently. And when the children get into the new ecological environment in the school, the children are finding it difficult because they need to adjust to the new system. So I think as a system, we need to come up with parenting programs that will assist to effectively make transition easy from home into the school system. That's where the problem is currently. But I think we are going somewhere.
Mr. Chidota, you refer to a continuum of services to do with early childhood development. Are all children benefiting from this? We mean the children coming from marginalized communities, the poor and the affluent. Is there a gap, or we are seeing equality in terms of access to these services?
As a ministry, there are three things that we look at. We look at access to education. We look at issues of equity to that access, and also the aspects of quality. Are those services quality? We also look at another aspect which is coming in, the aspect of inclusivity. So inclusion in terms of wherever the children are, geographically, they need to access that education. So as a system, we are trying by all means to equitably distribute educational resources to all areas, despite of the location of the children. However, we have marginalized communities who may not have resources that are requisite resources for all children to access ECD. For example, long traveling distances to school. But we as a ministry, we have tried our level best to adjust that, because we have community ECD centers which are attached to main schools. As a ministry as well, we have partnered with other private service providers like private ECD centers, which also gives access to education.
Mr. Bono, how have you seen this policy standpoint translating to practice in terms of especially the marginalized communities on the grassroots level? Are children accessing quality ECD services in all corners of Zimbabwe?
Can I start by saying, are we prepared for the quality ECD services in Zimbabwe? I think from the
maybe for the sake of everyone, we might need to define what quality is.
Quality services means what has got to be given, or the support services which are required for the children to meet what are called developmental milestones. Children should be able to speak, let's say, 3 words at certain ages. Or children are supposed to differentiate different shapes from the others at certain ages. For that to happen, and for them to be able to gain certain heights or mass, there are certain ages which are required for that. Those are indicators and milestones, which says if the child is not meeting this, then they are not developing well. As you know that in Zimbabwe, I think nationally, if I'm not mistaken, there's the standing of 23%, which is very high, according to the World Health Organization. And that is high. It needs to be reduced. But coming to what I was actually putting across, that we are not very well prepared. We have got accidental parents who come in with no preparation, and they suddenly have a boy or a girl or a young adult, or young adults, both a female and a male, having a child to take care of from pregnancy. They have not been taught how to take care of that child. And this happens up to 3 years without any conscious intervention which is put across, both in the school system and also in the community. Yes, we know that there are ministry departments which are responsible for that. And if we are taking the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, the Ministry of Health and Child Care, and the Ministry of Gender and Community Development, those need to sit together and say what is needed for a full package in order for early childhood development to be met.
So from what you're saying, I can pick that there is need for collaboration within the ministries.
Definitely there is need for that. Like what Mr. Kaunda was saying, the parenting program is sincerely not being met, and that needs to be done. So that there is also a conscious effort, not by the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, to start preparing for learning only at ECDA, but to have a learning program which starts at conception, because the child has got to learn from that level.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bono. I note that there is agreement that we do not have a strong program in terms of ECD and how it the 0 to 3 years is serviced in terms of programs to do with the parents and their ability to look after the child. Mr. Bono talked about accidental parents. I don't know what we think about that one. Let's meet in the next segment. Welcome back to School Readiness Conversation as we unpack early childhood development. Today I'm joined by Naison Bono and Kaunda Chidota. Earlier on we were discussing the definition of early childhood development and how the home environment affects how the child transitions to the school environment and how they perform. Mr. Bono, where are we as Zimbabwe in terms of early childhood development accessibility equality and inclusivity in terms of access to it?
As it stands at the moment, I think about 60% of all children are accessing ECD. When we are speaking from ECD A to and B, but unfortunately, the other 40% is missed, or it might be less, because I think because of capturing data, capturing information. But that aspect shows that a lot of children are not accessing ECD. And as a country, we should be worried about that. And we should be more worried about the minority and marginalized communities. You will find that although the statistics show that access to ECD is very low in urban areas, like Harare, which is about 13%, who are supposed to be, in terms of net enrollment, who are supposed to be in school, are in school in Harare. And in rural areas, it seems to be more. But however, the quality of the access is very, very disproportional in terms of the rural and the urban. And especially if we are looking at P1 and P2 and P3s. Most of the primary three are the disadvantaged, which are mostly situated in rural areas. And those are not accessing very much good quality services. There are reasons for that, because one, the infrastructure is being provided by parents and also the rural district local authorities. And in terms of that, they don't have the real resources to have the ECD centers equipped. Two, the teacher quality in those areas is very limited. We have got about 57 to 59% of qualified teachers in the whole of Zimbabwe. It means another 40% are required to man those centers and the children, and who are not qualified. But to add to that also, that those 60% are more likely in well-established centers and are paid their salaries by government. But the rest, in most cases who are not trained, are manned and paid on a voluntary basis by ECD centers and are based mostly in the P3 schools. And that alone is a problem. But if we come now to the disabled children, they are very, if too little, no centers or very few centers who cater for disabled children living with disabilities. And I think it's an area which needs a lot of focus and which needs to be supported a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bono. From what you're saying, I can pick that we have a policy environment that is taking shape and that is enabling, but maybe we might need to plug in more to do with implementation and how we track our how we are performing as a country. Maybe Mr. Chidota, you'd like to come in and discuss how well we are doing in terms of accessibility for children that are living with disability.
As Zimbabwe, we don't have schools for learners with disability only. Our schools are mixed. So most learners are accessing it from the normal school in a mixed school system. And we have just a few schools that offer such separate services. For example, Emerald Hill and a few others dotted in the country. But the policy standing is that everyone should access ECD from wherever he or she is, because those teachers, they are in service to provide those services, especially for those with impairments. Of course, we may be lacking the capacity to do it at a large scale, but the ministry is trying by all means to put that in place because there is a policy to that effect.
Can I come in and
Yes.
emphasize on the integrated approach that,
Yes,
children living with disabilities, if they can go into normal schools, I think we need to applaud the ministry about that. That they need to live normally because they won't be living separately in adult life. They will live with other people and in their own family. I think what we need to focus on as a country, as he has alluded to, is that all teachers now who are being trained need to have that capacity and the necessary skills to be able to deal with children with disabilities, which we was calling the inclusive approach to learning. And that is very important. And what it needs to be done also is to give appropriate and good resourcing within those schools. Because we are expecting those children with disabilities to live in a normal life where some able-bodied children are having difficulties. But for them, it will be double the difficulties of the children who are able-bodied.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bono, for clarifying that and adding on. In this segment, we talked about how we define early childhood development and the various aspects to it that are important to the development of the child. We interlinked how the home environment affects the school environment and how the child is ready for school. In this closing segment, we also talked about how important it is that every child accesses quality, inclusive and equitable early childhood development services. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today. That was a discussion filled with so much interesting stuff in terms of early childhood development and how the environment affects the child's growth and how they transition from the home to the school environment. As we closed up, we were talking about how enabling our environment is in terms of policy and how we can improve this so that every child accesses quality early childhood development services. Thank you very much for joining us.